And joining the show, making a triumphant return, none other than from phillyvoice.com, Mr. Shamus Clancy. Shamus, how you doing, bud?
I'm wonderful. I love when the Eagles don't play on Sundays, so I could actually be a football fan and watch the game, watch the Red Zone for 7 hours instead of going to the link.
So you jump right to Red Zone? You just watch that all day?
Yeah, just recliner back, food on the table, just ready to go.
I literally started Monday's show with that same, like, hey, my life doesn't suck by any means.
No.
But let me just get this in. If this is the way most people experience football Sundays, I am forever jealous. I am forever jealous.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have my job. Some days I truly believe that, but it is nice to kick back and do that sometimes.
Shamus, if your ears were ringing, man, by the way, if you don't follow Shamus on X, make sure you follow Shamus on X. The guy just doles out the content. Do love the cover photo there of Jim Tomey with the hot dog gun. That's always a winner. But if your ears were ringing, man, it's because I probably referenced this tweet 1,000 times after week one. This is your tweet about the Eagles. Did the Eagles win? Yep, they covered. How was it? It was the worst football game of all time. I don't think anyone summed up week one, and really even through week two. I think the tweet still applies. It hasn't been pretty. They're 2-0, but it's a very imperfect, perfect record.
Yeah, I tweeted that from the elevator from the Foxborough press box down to the locker rooms.
Very nice. I'm glad that thought hit you. But why do we have it in us as Eagles fans, or why does this fan base have it in their heads the way they have it, where it's not just about how they win, it's winning the right way. Like I always like to say, we like to talk about how there's no such thing as a moral victory, but is there a moral loss by chance?
I think if in your days as a fan or before I had my current job, I always boiled it down to if the quarterback played well, even if they lost, I consider that an encouraging game, right? Last season, the Eagles start 8-0. They lose their first game on Monday Night Football against Washington. There are a couple of huge turnovers. That's really deflating, but Jalen played awesome in the game, and you're thinking, okay, I'll take that as that's the fortune of going forward is if he's playing well, it doesn't matter if you pick up a loss or two there. And Jalen hasn't played great so far this year. Now, has he played better than he did as a passer in 2020 and 2021? Of course. But he put himself up to this MVP standard last year, and he's always going to be judged in that. He was the MVP runner-up. He doesn't get hurt and miss a couple of games. Maybe he is the one who wins MVP, and he nearly won Super Bowl MVP if the Eagles pulled that out back in February. So he does have a standard now where it's not just being good isn't good enough. He needs to be great, and it's going to be hard to sustain that on a week-to-week basis if you're not Patrick Mahomes, who even hasn't played well the last couple of weeks, and Joe Burrow hasn't played well the last couple of weeks. Really, this season has been really like stuck in the mud and mucky for offenses. And I don't know if that's a larger trend where these offenses aren't having enough reps in training camp. They're not playing at all in the preseason. But across the league, quarterback play has been pretty terrible, and except maybe Lamar Jackson did pretty well this week. So I don't think it's something to be concerned about. But if you're not winning with offense, if you're not winning with a passing game, it doesn't have the same pizzazz, I think, for the fan base. And that becomes a little worried because, in the playoffs, you're going to need to throw the ball to win. And Jalen has done that in the past and nearly did it to win the Super Bowl. He had an unbelievable game passing-wise. I think he was PFF's top-rated quarterback passer ever in the history of the website. So he's great as a player. But I think there's this idea that if you're not winning with a passing game, if it's not oriented that way, that's the true indicator of sustained success over the season, over multiple years, over the playoffs. I think fans get a little worried because of that.
No, that's definitely the bar that he set for himself, Jalen Hurts, this MVP level. But why do you think the struggles are the way they have been through the first two games, albeit them close together? Why do you think the struggles have existed through two games?
He has a long-standing relationship with offensive coordinator Brian Johnson. Obviously, he was the Eagles quarterback coach for the previous few years before Shane Steichen goes to Indianapolis. And Shane Steichen, I think, the fan base doesn't realize how important he was to that coaching nucleus the last couple of years, specifically their success last year. The way people lamented Frank Reich's departure after the 2017 Super Bowl, I think Steichen's departure is exponentially more important as a play caller, and the relationship he had with Jalen. I think Nick does a great job as he's more so, like a coach CEO. He has his fingers in a lot of things. He goes into the defensive meeting, special teams meeting. He isn't your traditional Andy Reid where all he's doing is play calling in that regard. But I think they miss him. And I think there's going to be some adjustment period with a new defensive coordinator. And I will say that he is in his first game. Brian Johnson goes against the greatest defensive mind in the history of the sport on the road. I mean, they're not the 2003 Patriots. That's still a little difficult. Week 2, he goes against a Belichick disciple, Brian Flores, with the Vikings, and he's had success as a head coach in this league, and I think will end up being a head coach at another time in the future. And bring us to week 3 with Todd Bowles, and Todd Bowles had a lot of experience playing against Jalen in that playoff game 2 years ago in Tampa Bay, the wild card round 2021 playoffs. Jalen had his worst game as a pro, maybe one of the worst games he's had since his stepped foot and started playing football in his life. And I think this week will be a big adjustment. The Eagles they're coming off not just a week of rest, 10 days of rest, 11 days of rest from Thursday night to Monday night. And I'm excited to see what Brian Johnson has dialed up from this week. I think this is a make or break game. I think if the Eagles lose, or it's a game again where they're not winning pretty, they're not winning with the passing game, you're going to start seeing some calls from a segment of the fan base, maybe even the media, that Nick Sirianni should be calling plays for this team. And I wouldn't jump that gun right away. I have faith in Brian Johnson being around the team the last couple of years. He struck me as someone who has the caliber to be a head coach in this league one day, not just a play caller. But I think if this is another game where Jalen has 225 passing yards, a touchdown, 30 yards on the ground, and 2 rushing touchdowns, and they win, 24-20, and they don't cover, or whatever it is, as 6-point favorites, you're going to see that build up a little bit. But give him some time. He's going to go against 3 good defensive minds in his first 3 times ever calling plays at the NFL level, not counting the preseason and working with Marcus Mariota and Tanner McKee. That doesn't matter right now. But I think you'll take 2-0. Take 2-0 and go from there.
Gotcha. All right. So I like to say that I'm not near the panic button right now, but if this third game of the season where they have all this time to kind of correct mistakes, get on the same page, work out the kinks, whatever it might be, essentially treating those first 2 games of the season as preseason games, right? If they have the ability to bounce back in this game against the Buccaneers and really show that they could dominate as an offense, then I'm going to be nowhere near the panic button. But if it's another game of the same where, they struggle again, but maybe they pull out the victory, maybe it's not as great an ending as we could hope for, I'm going to at least have that plastic protection off the big red panic button. Where are you at as far as that goes?
I think the margin of error this season is slimmer than Eagles fans might realize. You see the way Dallas played the first 2 weeks, and look, they didn't play 2 good quarterbacks at all, but that defense looks unbelievable. Their point differential plus 60 is the best in the NFL right now. The Commanders, surprisingly, I don't think they're for real, but they are 2-0. That looks like a team that, just the way that the NFC is set up, could go 9-8, 10-7, and grab a wild card berth. If the Eagles don't get a first round bye, they're probably not going to go to the Super Bowl. I think that's just the nature of the current playoff setup that's been in place since 2020. Only 1 first round bye. They're getting that. They're going to probably go to the Super Bowl. And it's not just that, the first round bye is up for grabs, but I think the NFC East, whoever's going to win that division is probably going to get the number 1 seed in the conference, and the other team's going to be relegated to the 5th seed between Dallas and the Eagles. And if you're not blowing teams away, if you're not taking care of business for the games that should be gimme wins, the games where you win by double digits and you take your foot off the pedal a little bit in the 4th quarter and Jalen comes out and rests up a little bit, it's going to be hard when you get into that really brutal stretch where you have Kansas City and Buffalo and, again, Dallas. And I think as long as they split the season series with Dallas, they should be in an okay spot to get in that first round bye. But that's their ticket to Vegas, is getting a first round bye. And the same would be true if we were located in Dallas and talking about the Cowboys, where, hey, if they split against the Eagles and they take care of their other business, their schedule is a little easier than the Eagles because of the number 1 seeds and the number 1 teams in the respective divisions are playing with the parity system. But I think that they got to take care of business in Tampa Bay. And they don't win pretty. We'll see what goes from there. Commanders game. So let's see. They go 3-0, win a little ugly. It's when they win by 4 or 5, not 6. They don't cover. Come home, short week, going against Commanders team that could be 2-0, could be 3-0, probably 2-1. They're playing Buffalo. They're at home. I like home underdogs a lot of the time, but we'll see what happens there. I don't really have that faith in Sam Howell yet, but I think Eric Bieniemy is doing a great job. First-time play caller there.
Mm-hmm.
They're 3-0. Don't look great. A paper tiger 3-0, and they come home and they face the Commanders, and they lose that game, lose a divisional game. I think you'll see some greater worry there. And if they're not taking care of those opponents, they need to go 5-1 in the division. They really do. I think 5-1 in the division. You split those Bills and Chiefs games. You take care of the 49ers. I think you're sitting pretty for first round bye. But otherwise, you're a little nervous, right?
It would be certainly at that point. Now I know a lot of people took this and ran with it, but the Jalen Hurts versus AJ Brown conflict, whatever that was on the sideline there, what did you make of that situation between the quarterback and wide receiver?
Up in the press box, I actually didn't notice it happening in real time. I obviously immediately saw it on social media while I'm, checking Twitter up there. But in the locker room afterward, Jason Kelsey, he was asked about it. AJ Brown, I will say, wasn't made available to the media after the game. He, I think, wisely by PR was like, "Hey, let's get out of here before the media members come in the locker room and start peppering you with questions." And Jalen brushed it off in his press conference after. But Jason Kelsey, I think he said something poignant where he said, it's good that guys are communicating. When you have real issues arise is when guys aren't doing that, is what he said. When that frustration is bubbling under the surface and it's coming out at the worst times. It's not coming out in this communicative aspect. And look, did Nick Sirianni want that to happen on national television? No, but he goes in there and tries to break that up a little bit, be the parent in the room and try to settle things between the guys. And look, AJ Brown wants the ball and he wants to win. And if he's getting the ball and they're winning, and look, they dialed up a couple plays from immediately after that. They can obviously do that. And maybe if there wasn't a couple shaky penalties, he has a touchdown, and we're not even talking about this anymore. They have a friendly hug on the sideline after. You just blame everything on the refs. That's the nature of the Philadelphian, right? But I think it's with the way Jalen's played. He's played good, not great. It's going to be hard to have two superstar receiver stats. They're both superstar receivers, Devontae and AJ, but with the current setup, it hasn't been there for both of those guys to have gigantic numbers. Obviously, Devontae has played unbelievable. He had a couple great catches. He had a 54-yard catch, I think a 62-yard touchdown. But AJ should just kind of, I think, chill. If they're winning, he's going to get his. I know he wants to be a superstar. Every receiver wants that be that way, and I love those guys to have that drive, because if you don't think you're the best guy out there, that goes for basically everyone. For the number one guy on the roster down to guy number 53, you're going to get your ass handed to you at some point in time if you're not confident in yourself. But I would say let's chill out. They're 2-0. You had, I think, 79 yards in week one receiving, the leading receiver then in a game that was muddied up in terrible weather conditions. If I know Nick Sirianni, I am expecting Monday Night Football, first play, a little RPO, chuck the ball down 80 yards downfield to A.J. Brown. That just seems like a very him thing. You might see him wearing an AJ Brown T-shirt at practice. That feels very on brand for him. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Perhaps, yeah.
A janky Kelly Green shirt that just says "Feed AJ" that he bought for $5 on the corner of Broad and Pattinson. That might be what we see at practice this week.
Yeah, that and the 3 soft pretzels connected in a brown paper bag right there. Yeah. That's great. Shamus, you mentioned Jason Kelsey. Have you gotten? I don't know the answer to this. I haven't prepped you for this. So, have you watched the Kelsey documentary yet?
Yeah, I watched it Wednesday night. I think the night before the Thursday night game.
I knew you would. I knew you'd seen it. And I just had a feeling. But it was phenomenal. It was just like, as a fan of film in general, and then someone who obviously really likes the Eagles as well. It was phenomenal. I'm sure you've gotten to talk to Jason Kelsey a number of times. I'm sure you've had a couple of conversations with him at very least. I thought it captured exactly who he was as a player and as a man.
I think it showed. I think the MVP that started the show was his wife.
Oh, I agree. I said the same thing to my wife. I said to her, you're going to watch this doc. You're going to love this documentary. You got to watch it because his wife is phenomenal. Absolutely.
Yeah, everyone loves Jason's new podcast he launched last year with his brother Travis. Where's the Kylie Kelsey podcast? That's going to start doing numbers. She just seemed like the most authentic Delaware Valley native there ever was, and it's a joke at this point. It's been the point that's been made ad nauseum, but Travis and Jason are obviously really two ends of the spectrum, right? Jason is definitely a little bit more gritty. Travis is more Hollywood, and I guess you could see by his current dating rumors, I think that checks out. Jason dates a girl from the area that went to Cabrini, and Travis is possibly, who knows, dating Taylor Swift. I think that's
for a girl from Reading. A girl from Reading.
A girl from Reading. Sorry. She's an Eagles fan too, right? Maybe not as big as Kylie Kelsey, but I guess ostensibly an Eagles fan. But it was so good, and I'm someone who. Look, I watch sports documentaries all the time. My hobby outside of covering football or writing about sports is going to the movie theaters. It's my passion. I love doing that, whether it's feature films, documentaries, whatever it is. And a lot of sports documentaries I enjoy, but maybe they're not necessarily artistic. I don't want to log them on Letterbox or anything like that. But the Kelsey one, look, I have some bias. I've watched Jason Kelsey play football for, almost a decade and a half now. Unbelievable person. Means a lot to the city. Someone who I truly believe is going to go down when all things are said and done as the most beloved athlete in the city's history. So there's some inherent bias there, but it was expert documentary making. And I think a point that will be a little souring for Eagles fans, that was clearly made with the idea that would be his last season, that they would ride off in the sunset, John Elway style. They won the Super Bowl, and that's the ending of it. And he goes back, and it's just the last shot is him playing with the kids in the backyard. That's the way it should be. And I think for Eagles fans, somewhat that makes it more of a film in the right way. Not everything's going to end on a positive note. Not everything's this Hollywood script. That there was an extra level of authenticity there where things didn't exactly go as planned. And maybe we get a little post-credit scene added in February in Vegas. We'll see.
The sequel, Kelsey 2. So I don't know. Yeah, that'd be amazing. There's been some things that have jumped out to me so far about this Eagles team. There is one in particular that I've been watching and I've just been amazed by. It has been Jalen Carter. Of the two games, I have just seen him eat in the middle of the line of scrimmage and been just as good as some of the comparisons that have been out there. Some comparisons link him to Jerome Brown, and I don't think that's fair for a guy who's played two games, but the wow factor, I think, is definitely there. Do you have a guy, and maybe it's the same guy, maybe it's Jalen Carter. Is there something that has jumped out or someone that has jumped out to you on this Eagles team that has really caught your attention through two games so far?
It's actually his former college teammate, Jordan Davis. And I did a little profile of Jordan on Friday morning after Thursday night's game. I spoke to him, and he emphasized that he wanted to be more than a run stuffer, more than a gap stuffer. He wants to be a pass rusher, and he got his first career sack in week one. Had a half a sack in week two. Also had a couple crushing hits on Kirk Cousins. And look, when they drafted him, the floor was he's going to be an elite run stuffer, could play half a dozen to 10 years in the NFL, but his swing skill to stardom would be what's his upside as a pass rusher. And he didn't really stand out a lot as a rookie. He was hurt, missed some time. I think there were conditioning issues there. Then this year they go trade up and draft Jalen Carter, and who, Rashad Penny asked in camp, he said hasn't seen anything close to him since Aaron Donald. That's a lofty comp. He reminded me almost a little Warren Sapp-esque. But I think drafting Jalen was going to take some of the pressure off Jordan, where Jordan didn't necessarily have to be this tier one superstar defensive tackle. If he was just merely very good, that would look good in comparison to Jalen, who everyone seems to think is destined for superstardom, a guy who's going to rack up all pro teams, things like that already. He's third in the NFL in pressures. He's played a disproportionate amount of snaps compared to the guys that are ahead of him on the list, Micah Parsons and stuff. But Jordan has really stepped up. I don't think he flashed a lot in training camp. I was a little worried about him, to be honest. Always a guy who has a great demeanor. Seems like he has a great work ethic. Always willing to speak to the media, stand-up guy. But what I've seen from him as a pass rusher, if I saw that from Jalen Carter this year, I'd be like, oh, he looks really good. This is a great start for him. And we're almost in a little bit of I feel like last year was almost a redshirt season for him. Didn't get a lot of those pass rush opportunities. In the middle of the season, when he got injured, they were struggling against the run defense. They signed Linval Joseph. They signed Ndamukong Suh. Those guys suck up the reps and snaps for him. But to see him playing this well, this versatile in both the run game, the Eagles have the best run defense in the NFL right now. It should be no surprise they have that. I know we have everyone's complaining about the linebackers, but that defensive tackle group is unbelievable. Those four guys could start on basically any other team. All four of them. Milton Williams, the forgotten man. Fletcher Cox is playing his best football since 2018, 2019. But Jordan Davis is the guy that surprised me the most relative to where he was last year at this point.
Gotcha. Last thing for you, and this broke literally right before we hit record. SI did a story about the Eagles having so many black quarterbacks, and black quarterbacks that have certainly made a phenomenal mark on the Eagles franchise and the NFL as well. Donovan McNabb's one of them, Jalen Hurts, Randall Cunningham, of course. But there is this quote highlighted by EaglesNation.com from the story on Sports Illustrated, SI.com. Donovan McNabb says Jalen Hurts was, quote, probably around 65 to 70% following his shoulder injury last season. He's, quote, wired differently. I asked him, like, Jalen, are you healthy? He's like, bro. I'm like, so you playing? He's like, what do you think? He's like, Sometimes you got to do the job yourself. You just got to do the job yourself. I told him, good, because if you wasn't thinking that way, I was going to call you soft. From Donovan McNabb, that could rub some people the wrong way. He's a very, I always have to explain to people who are not from Philadelphia why there's kind of this love-hate relationship between Donovan McNabb and the city of Philadelphia. But I think some people are going to take that an interesting way when they use the word soft, when Donovan uses the word soft, because I don't know anyone that would describe Jalen Hurts with that word. What's your reaction to at least that quote from the SI story?
I think the differences in their lone Super Bowl appearance probably speak for themselves in the difference between those guys. And look, before I had this job, I was obviously a crazy Eagles fan, grew up loving McNabb, having the jersey. And look, that Super Bowl thing will always be a little bit murky on, throwing up in the huddle, that infamous story, whatever goes on behind the scenes, the blow with T.O. and everything like that. So divisive figure for sure. And I think in retrospect, maybe the love is a little bit higher there than it was when he left or after the Super Bowl loss. But Jalen, I don't think anyone can call into question his grit, his intensity, his work ethic, his leadership, his intangibles are off the chart. And if those throws he was making in the Super Bowl down the field to A.J. Brown were at 65, 70%, Eagles might have put up 55 points if he was at 100% then. Wow, absolutely. Shamus, you do such a great job. Everyone's got to follow you on X and all social media platforms as well. And read all your stuff on Philly Voice, phillyvoice.com. It is fantastic. Shamus, thanks so much for being on the show, man. Appreciate you. Mark, my man, have me back anytime. Love doing it. You're the man. Shamus Clancy joining us right there on the Rothman Orthopedics guest line.